I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. Hope you guys are having a great Tuesday. We are back continuing our previews. We are all the way up to the AFC South, and we will be going over the Texans and the Jaguars today. But Dennis, it dropped from being like 100 degrees on Friday when we were last together to rainstorms passed through. And when I got home today, it was 68.
Isn't that just beautiful when that happens?
It did make me happier.
We've had a little bit of rain today. It was only in the 80s, but it did cool off. But it wasn't. It rained hard, but for a very short time.
Yeah, I think ours is we bounced back up into the 70s now because it's kind of clearing out, but there's a breeze. You know, I just opened the windows, flipped off the air conditioning, and save a little money or make up for the hard charging we did over our heat wave. I'm ready for it to be cooler. They said tomorrow we might not even hit 80 degrees, and you know what? That's okay with me.
I feel you, bro. I'm good with that as well.
I like that narrow band of, upper 60s to right around 80 is okay. But, it doesn't feel like you get that weather for very long at either. You probably feel that too. It drops off.
65 to like 74 is maybe even 63 to 74.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually even okay. I'll wear shorts in the upper 50s here.
I'm in Ohio. We wear shorts in February. Give us a 40-degree day. We're shoveling off the basketball court. I mean, not me personally, but like maybe back in the day.
Well, there was actually some news. We're getting some teams that are heading into training camp mode. The first piece of news, probably not great. A couple weekends ago, the Minnesota Vikings had one of their draft picks pass away as a passenger in a car that was hit by a drunk driver. And this weekend they had Jordan Addison getting arrested on DUI. Probably not a good look regardless, but feels a little bit worse, right? Coming so close.
Yeah, the optics aren't great. I don't know that you can necessarily, as a team or a league, penalize him more because of what happened to his teammate. But the optics are really, really bad. And in this day and age with Uber and Lyft and various other rideshare programs out there and money, like, do you know how high did he blow? Like, how drunk was he, I guess?
I didn't see a lot of details. I guess it happened in Southern California, which is where he played collegiate ball. So he must have been on some kind of a family trip or something.
Yeah, it's bad. You never want to be perceived as condoning that. It's just catch a ride, stay home, don't go out. If you're gonna get your drink on, by all means, and trust me, I despite my DUIs, I don't mean to sound hypocritical, but I learned some tough lessons, and I would hope that he doesn't have to learn them any more than he already has.
It says in the ESPN story that that the police have not made the level public, but .008 is the limit in California. He
Yeah.
was pulled over in Los Angeles, so probably not great.
I got pulled over once at almost 3x that.
Well, I mean, the fact that they aren't releasing it, you have no idea where it could be. A couple of big time receivers, a little bit of news. Both guys were looking for long term contracts, and neither, it appears, are going to get it from their team. T. Higgins, the deadline passed, so he will have to play on the franchise tag this year. And today, Brandon Ayuk, who, rumors have gone back and forth about what he wants, officially requested a trade from the 49ers. So far, reports are the 49ers have zero intention of trading him. Dennis, do you think one, both, or neither of these guys plays the full season on their current team?
I think Higgins will, and I think blindly maybe Cincinnati is holding out hope they can work a deal out, and that they can keep him when it comes time. Unfortunately, the hard thing is going to be if he has a year like he's capable of having, that will be really, really difficult. And he's the clear number 2 target. Where they used to have a really solid third in Tyler Boyd that could fairly comfortably step up and be a wide receiver 2 for the team when somebody was out. I don't think they have that person on their team anymore. Unless somebody rises to the occasion, which, they're professionals. You see that happen. But I think Higgins will probably move on next year. I think the writing is on the wall. Ayuk, it just feels like part of the 49ers dance. They'll keep, doing their thing, and they're going to work at their own speed, and the publicly asking for a trade just kind of feels like part of the kabuki theater that is the San Francisco 49ers. I feel like if I'm the 49ers, I would rather have Ayuk long-term than Debo long-term. I know they've locked into Debo for a couple more years, but I want to keep Ayuk. I think he's the better wide receiver. But if I'm San Francisco, I'm going to try to keep both of them as long as I can. I'm sure San Francisco, if they had their prerequisite or their obligatory, we're not trading him press conference.
I haven't seen a press conference. Just reports are teams that have called and tried to inquire have been told there's no chance for you. I actually think that both will end up playing for their current teams this season, because I don't know that Ayuk, outside of holding out, has any leverage. And because he's on his rookie deal, he may not accrue enough league years to be free. And
both teams are contending, legitimate contenders. And so it's not like the season is going to have to go drastically wrong for either one of them to go, we'll take draft picks or we'll take lesser receivers. If that happens, it would be that means that these teams are imploding.
Yeah. The other big piece of news, Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze finally signed their rookie contracts. I know there was a lot of hand-wringing on Monday when it hadn't happened, because the Bears were reporting to rookies were reporting to training camp today. Both deals getting done today. Both should be good to go. Did you have any concerns? What did you make of the hand-wringing, especially yesterday, about Caleb Williams? I have nothing to do with that.
So, the NFL has a rookie salary wage scale. It isn't like there's a whole lot of negotiation that's actually happening. You're going to get X. It's already predetermined. This is your draft pick. This is your position. This is how it's going to go. And, you can try to scramble and maybe try to get a little something here or there, but there's not a whole lot extra that can be done. And so I wasn't terribly worried. It doesn't make sense for either player to hold out for an extended period of time. Nothing good comes from that. And with the rookie salary wage scale, get to work, boys. Get to work.
I know I thought that especially there was so much hand wringing on. I was listening to the Full Network Radio when I was driving around yesterday. It's so much hand wringing about the deal not getting done, and the league might have to look into this. And then, wouldn't you know it, I look in the middle of the afternoon. They're like, or I looked early this morning, and Roma Dunze's deal was done, and then early afternoon, Caleb Williams has signed his deal, and I'm like, well, that was much ado about nothing. It must be the off season, Dennis.
That is correct, sir.
Well, that'll take us into our previews. Today we are heading to the South, the AFC South, which went from being one of the worst divisions to pretty competitive last year. 3 of the 4 teams finishing above 500, but the only one to make to the playoffs was the Houston Texans, who went from being the number 2 overall draft pick to winning the AFC South at 10-7. They also won a wild card game against the Browns, lost in the AFC divisional round to the Ravens. This offseason, running back Devin Singletary headed out. They lost right tackle George Fant and linebacker Blake Cashman. Among their additions, they brought in running back Joe Mixon from the Cincinnati Bengals. They traded for wide receiver Stephon Diggs from the Bills. They added defensive end Mario Edwards and cornerback Jeff Okudah. In the draft, they got a corner in Kamari Lassiter. They got a tackle in Blake Fisher. And later round, they got another tight end in Cade Stover. They did re-sign Dalton Schultz this offseason as well. Last year, rookie C.J. Stroud finished as QB 11, won the Offensive Rookie of the Year. In the backfield, Devin Singletary was running back 32, but Joe Mixon was running back 6 for Cincinnati. Nico Collins finished as wide receiver 12. Tank Dell in his rookie year, wide receiver 39. Little deceptive. He got injured in November, broke his leg, and missed the rest of the year. Stephon Diggs was wide receiver 9 for the Bills. Dalton Schultz finished as tight end 10. Dennis, this team went from 2 years ago, or even going into the season last year, looking like they were thin everywhere, to a seeming embarrassment of riches at running back, wide receiver, and tight end. What are you expecting in fantasy?
So they drafted Juice Scruggs last year in the 2nd round to take over their center position. And he immediately got injured. Not immediately, but he got injured, missed time this season. But he was a high draft pick. Laramie Tunsil at left tackle's got a lot in the tank. Titus Howard at right tackle. He had an injury-plagued year last year. They've invested in their offensive line. They built the team from the inside out on the offensive side of the ball. And then they went and got C.J. Stroud. They had Nico Collins in the fold. They drafted Tank Dell. They had some guys that we thought might be just good enough, in Noah Brown and John Mechie and Robert Woods. But then Nico Collins and Tank Dell basically had these great big breakouts. And then when they were down, Noah Brown had like 2 or 3 just blow-up games. It was crazy. C.J. Stroud, he went from being helmet scouted that, he's not going to do well because he's from Ohio State quarterback, to being a top 4 or 5 quarterback in fantasy drafts. He's young. He's got a good arm. He gets the game. He's paired with a good offensive coordinator that, much like Ben Johnson in Detroit, had his name bandied about as a potential head coach candidate and said, no, I'm going to stay where I'm at. If I'm C.J. Stroud, I'm hoping he stays for another season or 2 after this. But Houston, really, they're playing hard for D'Amico Ryans. They showed out really well. It feels like this feels like a team that is going to improve in ways you don't see this year. They might not win more games than they did last year. Heck, they may even miss the playoffs. I don't think so. I think, but there's a chance that they, and I said it about the Giants a couple years ago. They were a year ahead of schedule in how fast they improved. And if they can get it together, if Will Anderson continues his development, if Kamari Lassiter steps up and really secures the right side cornerback there, Jalen Petrie is a really good safety, at least for IDP. And Derek Stingley is going into his third year. He was a first-round pick at cornerback. So they have players on both sides of the ball, and they have fantasy assets. The one I'm most worried about, to be honest, is Stephon Diggs. Last year, in the last 8 or 9 games, he was like wide receiver 44 in Buffalo. It was, if you rostered him and he was your number one and you were relying on him to help carry your team, you probably might not have made the playoffs last year. It was tough after their bye week. And then he lands here in Houston where Tank Dell and Nico Collins already have chemistry with C.J. Stroud. Is C.J. Stroud going to start to force the ball to him to keep him happy? We've seen Diggs pout his way out of 2 situations. They already restructured his contract, giving him more money this year because they had the space. So if they want to get rid of him after this year, they can pretty easily. So I don't know. I'm excited about Houston. I do have reservations. I think they're good across the board at skill positions. This offense suits Joe Mixon's skill set to a T. I don't know if Dameon Pierce will ever come around. He averaged 2.9 yards a carry last season, and it just doesn't seem like this offense suits him very well. So I love a lot of pieces on this team.
Yeah, I think the only downside for the Texans and fantasy this year is the NFL saddled them with a Week 14 bye, which will definitely be a blow. Otherwise, I like C.J. Stroud. I think he could end up improving. I'll be curious to, the wide receivers. It's going to be interesting to see a little bit how it shakes out. Nico Collins hadn't been incredible when Tank Dell was on the field. How is Tank Dell coming back off of a broken leg? How does Diggs work in there? It's not that they won't be good and won't be playable, but I think it's hard to tell right at this second who ends up taking what spot and how they all shake out. I have a feeling that all 3 of them are going to be a little bit lower in a finish than what some people are expecting, because it seems like everyone you talk to thinks they're all going to be like top 20 receivers. And I don't think you might end up with one that's in the top 20, but we'll see how that goes. I think Mixon's going to help them out. I feel like Singletary probably, his numbers are deceptive too. He probably would have been up in the running back 2 territory if he had been the starter and getting that volume all season long. But they tried to limp along with Dameon Pierce for half the season until they realized that just wasn't going to work.
Can't run in zone blocking.
And that's not what they're going to do with Mixon. Mixon has been a steady performer for good teams. I don't know that he finishes all the way up at 6. I like him better as like a high-end running back too, but I think he'll be good in this offense. The other one that I have questions about is, Schultz was a great tight end 1 last year, and he fit in really well. But much like with Cole Kmet and the Bears, it's how many, now you have 3 wide receivers that you're getting involved, plus some other ancillary pieces, a back that can catch the ball. There's, only so many balls to go around unless the Texans fundamentally decide they're going to throw 1,000 times a game or 1,000 times a year. So I think all of them may have their ceilings capped a little bit because there are so many, but it'll make them a good team. You bring up finishes, so I take it you're not as bullish. I think they'll win the South again. I like them to get back into the playoffs. I actually think the team that maybe played better than expected that might take a little bit of a step back is the Colts, because they're in that same division, because they they finished 9-8 and were much better than we expected, especially with Anthony Richardson getting knocked out. I think everybody thinks with Richardson back, they're just going to thrive, but we never got to see Richardson go through some of the growing pains. CJ Stroud had to work some stuff out on the field and ended up coming out stronger because of it.
He did. So Stroud threw the ball 499 times last year, and as a team, the Texans threw it 592 times. I'm not sure where that ranks. But I got it right here. Let's see.
Yeah, because Stroud missed two starts that went to Case Keenum, and
that was 12th in the NFL. It's not. I don't think it's unreasonable to think they could move up a few spots in that, but I do think Mixon improves their running game, and so unless it ends up being a function of more them running more plays, they were 14th in plays. But it would take, they would have to add about 100 plays to move into the top 10. And I don't know, that feels like a lot.
Yeah, it does feel like a lot, especially for a team that is trying to build a good defense and trying to, I don't think D'Amico Ryans came out and said, hey, let's reconstitute the air raid.
Right. And you bring in a 230-pound running back that suits your system to a T.
Yeah. So I said I think they'll win the South. I don't know if you gave a record or a definitive projection.
I got it, but my screen blurred out. Hold on a sec. Why is this ad not going away? There we go.
I guess
so. I had them
at 6.
I have them at 11-6, finishing one spot ahead of our next team, one game ahead. I think they're going to be good in division. So, meaning I think they get Houston, or not Houston. I think they get Indy and Tennessee both games, and if they split with Jacksonville, that puts them at a real good in division record. Yeah, I like him at 11-6. What did they finish last year? Let me go back
10-7.
10-7. So, I could see him finishing 10-7 as well. I'm not looking for them to take a huge leap, but I do think they know what they need to work on. I think their head coach, D'Amico Ryans, is very focused, and they've put together a really good team and a really good scheme on both sides of the ball.
Well, that'll bring us to our next team, which is the team that finished second, Jacksonville Jaguars. They came into 2023 with, I think, a lot of expectations as a team that finished real strong in 2022 and ended up winning the division. It seemed like they were poised to kind of close to a division win again. They started out 8-3. They ended up 9-8, second in the AFC South. Calvin Ridley left and went to the Tennessee Titans. Zay Jones was released and is now with the Cardinals. And kicker Brandon McManus was also let go. They brought in wide receiver Gabe Davis from the Buffalo Bills. They also added Bills center Mitch Morse. They grabbed Eric Armstead, a defensive end from the 49ers, and they brought in cornerback Trey Flowers in the draft. They grabbed Brian Thomas Jr. out of LSU. They grabbed a defensive tackle in Mason Smith and another corner in Jerrion Jones. Last year, Trevor Lawrence finished as QB 13. Travis Etienne finished as running back 3. Calvin Ridley was wide receiver 18. Christian Kirk, who missed some time, was wide receiver 47. Gabe Davis was wide receiver 41 in Buffalo. And Evan Ingram finished as tight end 2. Kirk and Ingram have been kind of the big pieces of this passing game. They're both there. They added some ancillary pieces. We didn't see much from Tank Bigsby as a rookie. Do you think he comes up at all in 2024? What are you expecting from this fantasy group?
So Lawrence is just – are we finally going to admit that he's just not an elite fantasy performer yet? Not yet, but that he's just – are we yet going to admit that he's just not an elite fantasy performer? He's a good guy, but how much difference is there between Lawrence and Brock Purdy as quarterbacks? Purdy makes good decisions. Lawrence is more athletic. There's the way that San Francisco builds around Purdy. I almost think I might want Purdy over Lawrence.
I would take Purdy over Lawrence. I also think Purdy will finish better than Lawrence in redraft. I think you're right. I don't think there's anything wrong with Trevor Lawrence, but I'm with you. I think he's more of a quarterback too, which probably isn't what you thought you were getting when you drafted him.
It's almost like he's kind of Matt Ryan-ish without Matt Ryan's spike years. So
yeah, I mean, I feel like Ryan had more of a upside, and maybe they'll get there, but Jacksonville threw the ball 620 times last year. They weren't lacking for passing. I still don't understand what they're doing with their wide receivers.
I mean, they replaced 2/3 of them, bringing in Brian Thomas and Gabe Davis. I love Gabe Davis as much as the next guy, but in fantasy, I don't think there's anything about his potential and consistency that improved going to Jacksonville. I think he's still going to have some blow-up games. He's going to have some games where he disappears. I think they're going to, the team's best wide receiver is Christian Kirk, and he missed a couple games last year. And he's really a slot guy. And while both Arizona and Jacksonville have kind of beat the drum saying, no, he's not just a slot guy, the truth of the matter is when he is playing out of the slot, that's when he performs best. So they bring in two big guys in Thomas and Gabe Davis to put on the outside. You have Evan Ingram, who can flex out into a big slot role. If I'm looking for a high-value producer out of this offense, I think I'm going with Evan Ingram.
Yeah, 143 targets last year.
There's some risk of Kirk getting overdrafted. I also think, though, that if Kirk comes out, stays healthy, settles into the role, it may end up being he may return value at his draft position.
Yeah, and I think the big unknown is Brian Thomas and how quickly he adjusts and what we see out of him. I feel like at this point, Gabe Davis is what he is. If you could get a finish in the 40s, that would probably be the best. In some weeks, that's going to be a finish in the 10s, and some weeks that's going to be a finish in the 70s. And Kirk is the most consistent, but last year I think he started getting overdrafted after a quieter 2023. He might become more of a value because Calvin Ridley saw 136 targets last year. That's going to get doled out. Christian Kirk missed 5 games. He didn't just miss like a couple. He missed 5. He only played in 12. And I think he really only played on 11 and a half because I think he came out early in one of those. 85 targets. I would expect he can go up over 100 again. Evan Ingram, though, led the team in targets with 143 and had 114 receptions. I really don't see any reason for them to go away from him. You had 73 targets for ATN. I think he looks really good. Those are probably the two guys I'm banking on the most for top 12 finishes at their respective positions. It's hard to know what to make of Tank Bigsby. The redemption narrative this offseason was that ATN is going, into a contract year. They won't pick up the 5th-year option, so they kind of redshirted Bigsby. So this year he can take a big piece of the workload and then replace ATN. Well, they picked up his 5th-year option, and it looks like they're on track to try to sign him to a long-term deal. Meanwhile, Tank Bigsby, what averaged, I went to go look, 2.9 yards per carry on 50 carries.
That's Dameon Pierce territory.
Well, I mean, Dearness Johnson on 41 carries almost had the same production. Pierce had a few more yards and had 2 touchdowns. Bigsby had 2 touchdowns that Johnson didn't. But, I mean, Johnson was a better pass catcher. Only 4 targets, 1 reception for 6 yards. I'm not betting on Bigsby.
So Bigsby is one of those guys that in Dynasty, if I'm looking for an end of bencher that might gain some value, I'll see if I can get him thrown in on a deal. I liked him coming out, but he had as bad a rookie year, I think, and was as snake bitten as I think any player I've ever seen. It just seemed like it didn't matter. If you handed the ball to him, he dropped it. If you threw it to him, it bounced off his hands and became an interception. And it really wasn't that, but man, that's just what it felt like. And Bigsby's got some pop. He's got decent size. And then we start to hear at the beginning of the offseason, oh, he looks really good. And then you start to hear reports, not really. And so it'll be interesting to see. I don't think the way preseason is structured now, your starters don't play much at all. It'll be interesting to see how much they play Bigsby, to see can they get him on track to start the year, to feel comfortable with him as a backup. I don't think as a backup he provides any value. I'm not getting him for a handcuff. If I'm picking up Bigsby anywhere, it is solely as a stash and see if anything happens. I probably don't want him any higher than my running back 7 or 8, and that may be too high based on what he did last year. But I don't think Ernest Johnson is going to provide any fantasy value either, and I think Bigsby has the potential to be around a little longer.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely get rostering him. I just don't know that I have any hopes of production this year.
Somebody's got to be in that last spot, right?
Somebody's got to be, and if you are in a league where you can taxi squad guys for a couple of years, I would leave them on a taxi squad, because if ATN gets injured, and you can always bring him up and put him out there. Otherwise, you can carry him, see how things go, because I don't know when you're going to feel confident starting him, barring an injury. You said that you had the Jaguars right behind the Texans in your standings. I also do. I had them at 10-7. I think they're a 9-10 win team. I think they're going to just miss the AFC playoff field.
Yeah, I actually have them as the 7th playoff team in my quick and dirty 1-loss rankings. It's more one of those situations that somebody's going to be the 7th best team in the AFC,
or the 8th. Or the 8th or 9th.
Yeah, and so I have them with a 3-3 record in division. There are a lot of retread coaches in the NFL that are, we've had some high hopes for, that have come back and just haven't been great. Frank Reich fell flat on his face. Peterson hasn't done great things. Sean Payton has struggled. It's one of these things where, we're seeing a lot of young guys, the Slowicks and the Ben Johnsons, and a lot of coordinators that are not looking to rush up the ranks to the head coach position. I think part of it is they're going, man, I'm 30 years old or I'm 35 years old. I'd like to get some experience. 3 years ago, I was a barely paid, low-ranking offensive assistant, and now I'm an offensive coordinator because I worked hard. Maybe I should slow my roll a little bit and really, the downside of that is Byron Leftwich was in that position at one point, and his offense fell apart, and he never
Kellen Moore, Eric Bieniemy. I mean, you don't know what's going to happen with them. I was happy for Ben Johnson that he stayed, but we'll see how.
Not as happy as me.
Peterson's been not too bad, but not incredible. I think they're literally 18-16 under him. I think they were 9-8 both years.
Yeah.
And that collapse down the stretch last year. They also, if you read a lot of NFL analysis that isn't specific to fantasy, the questions about Jacksonville are not on the offense. They're how good that defense is. And it seemed like their defense struggled a lot last year. So I think that's going to be questions to see how far they go. And I just think the AFC is still top heavy. You have a great division top to bottom in the AFC North. I think you have 3 teams in the East that are good. The Chiefs are still good. And you have 2 or 3 teams even in the South, and there's only so many wins to go around. That's why when I was doing my first pass, I have 11 being what it takes to get in the AFC, which seems ridiculous, but
it could happen.
Could happen. Well, that'll do it for us today. We will be back on Friday. We will be looking at the Indianapolis Colts and the Tennessee Titans, a couple more second-year quarterbacks that are trying to prove their mettle in 2024. We also have a guest, another member of our league, good old Colts, who is, as you might guess, a Colts fan. So that'll be a little bit of fun. Dennis, if people, in between Hard Knocks episodes and binging Receiver on Netflix, what can they do to fill their time?
Well, it's the time of year. You got to mow your yard, weed your garden, do a little landscaping. You pop them earbuds in, you go to your favorite podcast platform, and you search the Fantasy Football Roundtable. Hit that like, that subscribe button, leave us a rating and a review, and listen away. Before you know it, your outdoor chores will be done.
It's the way to do it. Well, that'll do it for us today. Enjoy the rest of your week. We'll see you on Friday.